Okay. Well, thank you all, and a warm welcome to the Gower AONB Partnership Steering Group meeting. Councillor Mark Thomas, warm welcome to yourself. It's the first meeting now, isn't it? If I got this right. Yeah. And
yeah, first meeting, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Thought as much. Yeah, well, welcome, and I hope you find it enjoyable and interesting. So anyway, the first item on our agenda is the election of a chair for the 2021-22 vice chair for the 21-22 municipal year. Any nominations? Well, Mark, you can hand up. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I was hoping you'd continue, Chair.
Vice chair. Yeah, I corrected that. Nominations are there any?
Can I ask, Chair, who is the current Vice Chair?
Steve Hurd.
Steve Hurd, yeah.
Yeah. Is he here?
No.
Can't see him.
Oh.
Shall I volunteer again?
Yes. Thank you, Linda. Before we do any other nominations,
Doesn't come to much work.
I can't see. Does somebody second that? Linda's volunteered.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Well, back to know you. All right, and Gordon, thank you. So, right, can I see everyone in favour of Linda as Vice Chair, please? Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. Welcome, Linda. Thank you. Second item, then, is any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Andrew Stevens, also from James Chambers, Paul Tucker, John France and Roger Button.
Roger, okay. Well, that's okay, thank you. Item 3 then, are there any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Mark Thomas?
Yes, Chair. Item 6 on the agenda, personal interest, because I was the Cabinet member responsible for that award of grant, and item 8, roadside verge management, that comes directly under my area of responsibility. So just personal interest, that's all. Thank you.
Item 4 is to approve.
Sorry, Chairman. I'm not sure whether I do need to declare an interest, but I am a member of the Economy and Infrastructure PDC. But
okay, well, we both are, so perhaps we better.
But if I need to, I have.
Okay, okay, so anyway, item 4 is to approve sign as record of the previous meeting. As it goes, page 1 to 6. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and page 6.
If anybody's got no objections, Chairman, then I'll be happy to propose they'll be accepted.
Okay, thank you so much. Right, some items in. Item 5 is the Sustainable Development Fund. There's a report. First one is, well, they're both from Mike, but the first one's a financial summary, and there is an update to that, Mike, isn't it? And then the proposed amendments to our terms of reference. You see those on page 7, page 8. So you moved it there, Mike? Yeah.
Helps if I unmute, doesn't it? Right. The SDF financial summary. I do have an update on that, and it's that we've fully committed the fund for this financial year at the moment. We had a panel meeting last Monday and they approved the Gower Badgers vaccination project 2. So that's our funding fully committed for this year. So that's just a quick update on those there. Moving on to the second one, the proposed amendments to the terms of reference for the SDF grants panel. Welsh Government held a meeting with us 2 or 3 weeks ago now, just to discuss how the SDF scheme was running. One of the proposals was that we try and update the terms of reference so we have a smoother turnover of the panel membership. I think that from the recommendations you can see on the paper there, we will try and come up with a form of words which enables us to appoint 1 or 2 new members to the SDF panel every year, rather than doing it each time we have an annual or biannual election. That would mean that we keep the experience of the previous panel members, but we also bring in new panel members as well. I will put something together for that, and I will present that to yourselves at our next meeting. If anyone has any comments on that, I'd be grateful for them being passed on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, as you say, if people will input into Mike's report here, then hopefully we can produce a really good report for the next meeting, and hopefully then get it adopted. Yes, thank you for that. Thank you very much. And then agenda item 6 is the Sustainable Landscapes, Sustainable Places, the award of the grant and identified projects. And Chris, I could see your report there. Did you want to add anything to it?
No, not really. I think it's quite self-explanatory. Yeah, we gave the partnership the heads up that this grant was going to be awarded, and we were developing projects. So this paper provides sort of further details on those projects and how they're going to be taken forward over this coming year. What we still don't know is whether this is going to be a regular funding stream coming direct from Welsh Government, or if it's if this is just another one-off that we want to take advantage of. But that's something we're working on. But I'm happy to take questions on any other projects.
Indeed. So don't say no to more funds, do we? So thank you very much, Chris. Any comments? Any questions?
Yes. Can I come in on that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
The Fairwood Common issue, Chris. I mean, I've lived on Gower for 50 years, I suppose, but it's always been an issue about not being managed very well. I mean, what do you propose to do for the money that you've got down there, the 50 grand?
Thanks, Gordon. I think the issue has always been about management, but it's always been at different extremes. So there have been times when there's been too much grazing on the common, but certainly over the past decade, I would say that the issue has been more about undergrazing. So that has led to development of a lot of scrub, which requires clearance. But also we're looking at measures that will actually encouraging those who have grazing rights to exercise them, and try and remove some of the barriers that people are facing around their reluctance to put stock on the common, which is critical as far as we're concerned for maintaining the biodiversity. So we've been working with the commoners to try and improve that management. There's an area of land that the council own on the west side of the airport that is not part of the common, but the council own, and we've been doing some management on that to try and use that as an area where we can manage stock within, with benefits for the management of sorry, it's an area that's not part of the common that we have control of. So we can direct stock it in there for their management, their welfare. I think, Mike, we've already put up fencing in there, and we're looking at providing water in there as well.
Yes, that's right. It's basically so that we can provide a secure area where livestock can be put in for a short period before being released out onto the common. It will give us an opportunity to provide watering and feeding as well. Gordon, if you're looking on the map, it's the bit round, just next to the
So by
scout.
Moor Lakes.
Yes.
By Moor Lakes.
Moor Lakes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Between Moor Lakes and Courthouse, probably, is it?
yes.
Yeah.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. I find.
Sorry?
Steve is coming late.
All right, okay, welcome, Steve.
Gordon, I think the other thing we're looking at is you've probably seen programs where livestock have had collars put on them to control the area where they graze, and the sort of fenceless fencing systems, which we've trialled on other smaller parts of common land elsewhere, and that's something we're looking to implement on Fairwood if we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
There are also some proposals for improved public access as well, mainly to do with the rights of way network and things, but we need to finalise those before any work happens.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.
Anyone else? I can't see if there's a hand up. Oh, Paxton.
Just a question really in terms of this. There seem to be a lot more cattle on the commons at the moment, some of the belted ones as well as the Highland cattle. Are these all privately owned, or some being brought in specifically for common management purposes? Because my understanding was some of them had been brought in for that purpose. Do we know what the situation is?
No, we don't, Paxton. I'll be happy to look into that. We're due to meet with the commoners anyhow to scope this project out, so we can find that out.
And is Sean Brackenbury involved in any of this?
Yeah, I expect Sean will be involved as part of all of this. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paxton.
Okay. Ta.
Props. No other hands up? No. We can see from the report that went to Cabinet, consultation was out to local members, etc. Guessing it's for us to note, is it, Chris?
Yes, that's fine. It was just keen that you had the most up-to-date information about the projects that we're taking forward. If any of the members want to get more involved or to find out some more about it, then please contact either myself or Mike.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Chairman?
Yeah, go on.
Just a quickie. We spoke with Chris about this before it came online, but I am concerned that Pennard Castle is receiving £30,000. It's owned, I understand, by the golf club. They're reported to have had a considerable sum of money from this film crew a couple of weeks ago. As a society who's contributing towards this work as well, I just would like to think and know whether the money they received for access down to the beach is being put into the pot for Pennard Castle.
Well, we'd have to. Who do we get the information from here? Yeah,
I'm not dealing with them.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to raise that with the golf club as part of the project going forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then please, anyone who wants to make an input into this, please do so. And then, Gordon, this item 7, the Gower Society, your woodland project proposal.
I would hope you've seen the document that came with your agenda and what have you. This is a very broad brush outline of what the society is thinking, and there's nothing firm there at all. But we are conscious that we are prepared, and I've got to be careful what I say here, we are prepared to put a considerable sum of money into a project that will be long-lasting, sustaining, and in perpetuity. We don't want to put money into something that's here today and gone tomorrow. So we just hope that we could work with one of our colleagues on the steering group, people who are not on, in fact on, but similar colleagues, such as the Woodland Trust, National Trust, the West Wales Forum, and with the what the hell, the name's gone. The
Wildlife Trust.
The Wildlife Trust. Thank you. And if anybody's got any ideas on that, one idea that has been mooted, and Chris touched on this earlier, was the possibility of planting up woodland, big woodland. We're not talking about a couple of acres here. We're thinking much bigger than that, on land that wouldn't cost significantly a great deal of money, because it defeats the object. If you've got to spend 10 or 15,000 pound an acre to plant trees, that's beyond our ability to do that. But if there was land which didn't command that kind of price, and you touched on Fairwood Common, now I know a lot of people will immediately go against that, the commoners may, but until they're asked, we don't know, do we? And I know they're all triple SIs or equivalents of, so it's a very difficult area to tread on. And the one, I'm not going to go on about this, one final area that's been suggested was the green wedge areas, which are they're sterilised at the moment. And they're not, when I drive between Clyne, not Clyne, from over towards the Wernalloys area, from Cockett, there's vast area of land there which is green wedge. And I just float the idea to you, what would it take to sterilise that area for development of woodland, so it would stop it being built upon and make it public accessible to people who are living very, very close. So that's the kind of ideas. I don't want to say any more, but if anyone can come back to us on that, we'd be gratefully appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike.
I was just going to say, I was talking to Deb Hill this morning, Gordon, about this, and she suggested that Gower Society contacted Nature Conservation Team because they've been doing some mapping of tree planting opportunities and connectivity. So it might be useful for you to have a word with them, because they could show you the mapping that would maybe highlight some suitable areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No worries.
Well, it'd be good to see progress. Paul?
I was just wanting to let Gordon know that the Wildlife Trust will happily talk to him and share thoughts and ideas.
Sorry, Paul, I didn't see you there, so I did struggle to get your official title, but thank you. We would like to do that. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Well done. Good. Well, let's hope we can progress that. Chris?
Thanks. I talked to Gordon about this earlier, and I'd say there's other initiatives out there at the national level that would fit with this. So I think everybody's probably aware of the launch last year of the National Forest for Wales. So there's policy behind that now. It's part of the latest sort of national planning policy. I think that the Welsh Government proposals are not specific to a particular area of land or a particular place. but it's clear they want some local connections to all of this, and I think something on I'd say sort of wider Gower, not necessarily the AONB, which would fit with what Gordon's perhaps looking at, would go down very well. I'm more than happy to try and facilitate a discussion, a meeting further to take that forward, and we'll see if we can get someone from the National Forest to help with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you all. Right, then, item 8. I can see the lines up. Item 8 then is the roadside verge management, and your stuff again, Chris. And we still on page 17.
Yeah. So the steering group members raised with me the issue of roadside verge management and how it's been done at the minute, and how that limits its value as far as biodiversity is concerned. So I'd taken forward the discussions with highway officer colleagues to find out a little bit more about what the proposals are there, and I was pleased to discover this particular paper that raised discussions. But also associated with that, I've had I've seen a presentation by a gentleman called Philip Sterling from Dorset County Council, which I think which the highways officers have seen as well. But it was all around how with a change to the cutting regime on highways verges, you can improve biodiversity, and there's also the potential for cost savings. And I'm sure Councillor Mark Thomas will want to add something to this, but it is something that the highway officers are looking into. So I wanted to raise it here to see if we can get some input from the partnership.
Okay, thank you. Any hands up? Linda first.
I quite agree. It'd be good to have more plants and flowers along the verges, but we've got to be careful that we continue to cut those verges that people are using to walk on, especially where we've got no pavements. We've got quite a few of those around Pennard and Kittle.
Yeah,
and they're important, especially for children trying to get safely to school.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Councillor Mark Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a much more complex issue than one can imagine. Initially, I mean, a lot of people say, well, why didn't you just let the grass grow? I wish life was as simple as that. We could just what tends to happen when you just let the grass grow, you get an unmanaged mess. That's generally what happens. So, whatever we do, it has to be done in a managed way. So if we let the grass grow, it still requires cutting, and it still requires, for best results from what my parks officers and the guys tell me as well, is because what we tend to do now is cut grass and leave it lie. But unfortunately, that feeds the ground. And plants and wildflowers, native flowers, survive best in less fertile ground. So the management of it would require cutting it less often, but then removing the cut grass. So although it may seem like an easier thing to do and a cheaper thing to do just by simply reducing the mowing or the cutting, it may not necessarily be that way. And cost is not the driver on this. The reason we're looking at this is because, as everybody knows, we've signed up for the climate emergency, and we are taking that seriously. And we, as well as looking at reducing the amount of verge cutting, we're looking at all our grassed areas. So, for example, I think in the last year we're cutting 45 hectares less grass in parks and green spaces than we were a year ago, because and it's finding that balance. The other dynamic of all of this is we get lots of calls, obviously, from many people and different sources to why don't we let the grass grow because of flowers and pollinating bees and all that. But we probably get equally as many, if not more, when we do leave it grow, from irate residents who like their grass cut low. and to within an inch of its life. So it's finding that balance, and that's why this has gone through and is going through the PDC process. Because what you want to do is you want to bring people along with you. If you are going to, because what tends to happen if you just leave green space, whether it's in parks or verges, uncut, people generally think that we haven't bothered with it, or we've forgotten about it, or we're saving money. So it needs an education program along with it as well. So if we are leaving areas of grass and uncut, people in the locality, residents, need to understand that there's a reason for doing that. There's a motive behind it, and it's not a cost-saving exercise. It's for biodiversity and environmental enhancement. So, and the other one is, and I think Linda touched on it as well. If you there's certain verges, because of safety, we have to have vision splays. So we're going to always have to cut some of the verges because of road safety. So we need input from the highways guys on that, and access, pedestrian access, disability access, and all that. So again, it's more than just making a decision to leave grass. If we reach an agreement that that's the direction we're going to go, then we need to roll this out. Sometimes, I don't know, community by community, and look at almost each grass verge as we go along and identify the ones that are suitable for being left and the ones that will have to continue being mown. So it's quite a big deal. It's not a big deal in the way of frightening or we shying away from it, but just to say that and it's something that's going to roll out over a number of years. It's not going to come in perhaps next year across the city. So we might have to do it in bite-sized chunks as well. I mean, we have been fortunate enough to gain more grant funding for equipment that'll help us to carry out these sort of things. So it's cutting and collecting equipment, and that's a big deal. That's a big help for the service, and we've got new machinery, or are having new machinery to be able to do that. So, but I said, yeah, it's certainly, there's an appetite within the authority to be doing this. So you're pushing against an open door on it, but it's just about managing it so that it's just not seen, as I said, as a we just not cutting the grass. It's certainly that's not the best way to improve the biodiversity anyway. It has to be, and I'm sure the guys on the call recognise that.
Thank you, Mark. As you say, but broad brush approach won't work, and it has to be done on a case by case basis. Is what you're saying. Yeah, Paul Thornton.
Hi, yeah, my thoughts just progressed as Mark spoke then. When he said taking it forward community by community, I thought that was brilliant, to be honest, because I was just going to share some observations of mine. I live in Llangenneth. Most of the lanes west of the Greyhound out to Llangenneth and Llanmarag have very steep roadside banks where when the mower passes, the horizons drop off, and in spring, up until mid-June, the floristic diversity of those verges is brilliant. So you can almost target where needs the cut and collect technology, where you can cut and drop, depending on the steepness of your banks and things like that. But then I also observed that people in this village now, especially as tourist traffic has increased, are starting to rant about the fact that uncut verges push people into the middle of the road. So there's a real balance to be found, but
yeah,
it's exciting times.
Yeah.
I'd also like to comment, a personal gripe of mine is I see it as urbanization of the countryside. These glyphosate sprayed verges and pollinator mixes, I think there's some around Llanryddion and some in Bishopston, and the change in management and actually encouraging the flowers that should be there would be a far better approach there, I think.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Paul. Chris, did you still have your hand up, or you want to come back?
Yeah, it was just briefly. Just I think Mark explained things really well. The only other aspect to it that I would add to it was that when you remove the arisings from the cutting, you take away a lot of the fertility of the soil. That encourages the better diversity, but it also it reduces the fertility of the soil. So the regrowth is less. So the potential is that you don't need to cut as often, to maintain an appropriate sward height.
I see. Gordon, you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, thanks, Mark, for that, because we were guilty of pushing a question to Chris about this 3 weeks ago, because a number of our people, and I really recognise your predicament on this, but I think Chris has explained it. I think I drive around probably less than we used to around Gower, but there are areas that definitely have got to be done 2 or 3 feet in from the edge of the road. There's no question about that for safety. But there are areas that could still be reviewed, which seems to extend beyond that. And I think common sense is probably a good word to use here. And seeing as our Prime Minister thinks it's flavour of the month to use the word common sense, we might as well use it ourselves. But no, seriously, I think I'm pleased to hear what Mark said. Actually, I'm encouraged, because my gripe, and Paul had got one, my own gripe is that I really don't like to see too much money spent on all these so-called wildflowers in certain areas. I know they look nice and they look great, but we're chopping down flowers to grow flowers. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. I know it's not as simple as that, Mark, but there we are. Thank you.
Did you want to come back with anything there, Mark? You've still got your hand up.
Yes, yeah, no, I mean, Paul, thank you for reminding me about the comments on the verges, and this is the dilemma we have to face. I mean, currently, I am facing far more complaints. I get emails all the time, and I've got emails in my inbox now dealing with complaints from residents who are complaining about why are we letting the hedgerows grow and the verges grow, and it's making their driving difficult through these narrow lanes. Some of my comments when I go back is to say, well, generally speaking, if we travel well within the speed limit in these narrow lanes, and narrow being the definitive word, then, you know, driving should be, I mean, I drive up to Three Crosses on a regular basis. I know Paxton don't like me up there, but I do travel up that way quite often.
I've never shouted at you for going up there.
And I do quite often have to drive quite much in the middle of the road. But I don't drive up there 40 miles an hour. I drive up there 50. Those roads are about 20 miles an hour, although it's a 30 or 40 mile speed limit. If you drive according to the road conditions, then it's okay. It's when you want to go a little bit fast sometimes that they're an inhibitor. But in reality, that's the issue we've got to deal with. Not everybody is in favour by far of leaving hedgerows and verges grow. So we have to find that balance. And it is, I mean, obviously now we try to not cut at this time of the year most of the verges and hedges because of bird nesting as well as the flora and fauna. But, you know, the birds are still nesting. But some people generally, that isn't their high priority. They want, you know, roads that they can travel faster or drive closer to the edges or something like that. In regards to the wildflower planting, and I know we do use herbicides for that. I mean, I will say that the use of glyphosates and that within the authority has reduced hugely from what we used to use. Okay, but the wildflower, right? I'm not denying any of the concerns that people are raising, but generally speaking, amongst the public of Swansea, I know from my own ward, they're hugely welcomed, and particularly during this year now with the pandemic and mental well-being and that, they do bring a smile to people's faces, and generally they are. Longer term, perhaps we need to be looking at other alternative methods of developing wildflower sites through natural growth and that. But I think they were a wonderful initiative when they come in. They generally welcomed by the public. But that's not to say, look, you know, we are progressing. Our approaches to what we do with the environment and enhance the environment is different than it was 10 years ago. And we're always looking, and I said, climate emergency environment is at the tip of many people's tongues now. And it's something we are adapting to and changing all the time. And past practices will change. There's no doubt about that. And we are going to get progressively more environmentally friendly. There's no doubt about that.
You got your hand still up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Chris, that presentation, was that West Dorset and Plant Life?
It it was certainly Philip Sterling, who used to work for Dorset County Council's now working for Butterfly Conservation.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've seen
Sorry,
that presentation, and I think when he presented it to the Biodiversity Partnership, they said they were going to try and make it public afterwards. So if anyone else is interested in seeing it, because it was inspiring, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely was. Yes, and he explained all of the ecological principles behind it in a very straightforward way, very simple way. It was well worth spending 20 minutes or so looking at it.
Good. Paxton.
Just a quickie, Chairman. I thought Mark might be going to say that one of the reasons for not doing the lanes, of course, is that is psychological traffic calming, because we don't know anything about traffic calming in three crosses, you see, so it would be useful for us, but that's another story, I guess. But it is a full. Having said that, the work of the PDC is going to be important in this, and I think Mark will recognise that. What is obviously the case across Swansea is not going to be one size fits all, and it's going to have to be modelled very closely for the urban areas as opposed to the rural areas and the semi-rural areas, as the case may be. So it's going to be a complicated balance that I think we're going to have to find, and I'm sure Mark will be looking forward and looking for plenty of help in that area, because it's not going to be an easy one.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. It's caught my out for you there, Mark, and I think we would welcome comments there. Right, no other hands up. Well, excellent discussion then. And item 9 then is informal camping, overnight camping on page 24, 25. Mike, you're going to anything to add to your report?
Yes, thank you. Right, I was going to talk about this briefly, and then I'd like to get comments from the members, because I think you have a better idea of what's happening out on Gower at the moment than I do. This is a common problem, the issue of, well, let's call it informal camping and overnight parking. This is not a new thing. It's not just Gower. We know that we've been dealing with this for years. I know it's an issue right the way up from the southeast of England all the way up to the north of Scotland. It is complicated. You'll see the report highlights 3 different descriptions. One which I think I'll just go over quickly because I think it helps focus mine slightly. The wild camping per se is usually one that's used, but technically that really only applies to non-motorized camping. It's the sort of thing you see if you're backpacking or you're cycle touring or something like that. It in itself is not usually a problem, and historically I think most landowners have quietly looked the other way. It's usually, by definition, wild camping is discreet and usually leaves no trace at all. The one that we are talking about is informal or freedom camping. The 2 terms are sort of mutual, and I'm not quite sure which is going to be the common one at the moment. Those really cover overnight parking or camping by the roadside, either in vehicles or tents. This is a tricky one. Dirty camping, if you like, is the next one up that definitely causes problems. This is camping, but where you've got additional issues with antisocial behaviour, or sort of even possibly criminal behaviour, where you've got littering, damage, noise, disturbance. That's the one that causes most problems. Part of the problem is that depending on the situation, informal camping, freedom camping, is not technically a legal offence. It's a civil offence which makes it quite hard to deal with in terms of a Gower level. In some cases, overnight parking is actually suggested, highlighted by the highway code, which says if you're feeling tired, you should pull over and rest. Now, if that rest is overnight, then that's entirely within the law. Because this is a civil offence, the police would tend not to be involved. It's not something, unless it's on council-owned land, it's not something that the council has any powers over. If you remember, we used to have Hugh, our ranger, and we had the Gower Safe partnership with the police. The arrangement where Hugh and either one or more of the police officers went round on a Friday or a Saturday night was largely along the lines of requesting people to move on. We have very few powers to actually enforce that. That was pretty much just asking nicely and hoping people would oblige. Dirty camping, or where we've got antisocial behaviour, that's a stage where the police can get involved. The tricky bit is if you have antisocial behaviour with just one or two people out in the countryside, that's a lower priority than, should we say, something going on in Wynn Street on a Friday night or a Saturday night. So that comes down to the issue. The real key to managing this is enforcement and how you actually get staff out on usually on an evening, sometimes at weekends. Some of the really interesting work on this is going on in the Highlands. Highland Council have been addressing this because they have a huge issue with overnight and roadside parking and camping, partially because they have a different legislative system. Access rights apply to wild camping, but not vehicle overnight parking. So they have invested in, I think it's about 12 new ranger posts this summer. They're having a big push with the camper hire businesses. They're looking at providing informal airs across the Highlands. The idea of the airs is quite interesting. It's a tricky one because it isn't currently fitting with planning legislation, but they are looking to find ways of set up and run small, up to 3 vehicles at a time, probably, short term, overnight, possibly 2, but it looks as though it'll just be 1 night. Really basic camping or parking facilities provided by crofters. So in our case, it would be local farmers with either the corner of a field or maybe just a corner of a yard somewhere where camper vans would be able to park up overnight, have possibly facilities for drinking water, but not much more. I'm going to keep an eye on that one because I think it's a really interesting situation. They are trying to find ways around this. Their bind at the moment is that a lot of their tourism is focused on the North Coast 500, which is if you like, a road trip, a publicised road trip around the Highlands that's designed to draw in a lot of road traffic, which would be campers, big overnight parking vehicles. They had a huge amount of pressure over the last couple of years, which really peaked last year. They obviously don't want to stop people doing that because it drives their tourism industry, but they also they recognise that there's huge impact on communities. So that's the reason they are currently, if you like, leading the field on this. Our problems, I would say, are a lot smaller, thankfully, and we have a smaller area to deal with. But I'd be interested to hear from members what they see going on at the moment, and maybe discussion about how we might manage it. But I will add that, as I say, this is an issue we've been dealing with for several years. It's not going to be easily and simply resolved. It is a very tricky issue. We had a number of tents a couple of weekends ago on Mumbles Hill. It took myself and one of the other council officers something like 3 or 4 days to deal with one tent, which was abandoned in the end, and we simply had to take down and put into storage for a while. So I think better simply stop there and ask for people's comments and questions.
Yeah, my travels around, not just in Gower. And in fact, there was, just before I came out, there's a Facebook page set up for those who travel around in camper vans and park anywhere. So it's organised. Paul?
I seem to have a lot to say today.
Carry on, you're all right.
Good.
My initial thoughts were that to be like I wrote down a note about the NC 500 and that Scotland almost shot themselves in the foot by promoting their country as being a place to go and travel and do that, and now they're having to deal with the implications. So for word to get out that, you know, Gower was this destination, it could easily be filled because Gower's a lot smaller than Scotland. Another problem that Gower AONB couldn't solve, but in New Zealand they have different classifications of camper van or motorhome. So some are classed self-contained and you are allowed to wild camp, and some aren't, and they're meant to go to a site. And my personal experience, I think I've done this year 2 evictions of parties of 15 or 20, what you would classify as dirty camping. Trouble is, they're always really nice people. They're just enjoying the countryside in a way that lots of people deem wrong. And they've never given me any trouble, and the police have never been prepared to give us any assistance unless I'm being threatened there and then. So I've got kind of lucky.
Indeed. Yes, thank you, Paul.
We're in exceptional terms last year and this year, and we mustn't forget that. We've got a 5-van CL site, which we could have filled probably 10 times over this year. It's full from the end of March through to September. Now, we turn people away all the time, but they're not the kind of people in the main who would park up the side of the road, because they just don't do that. You know, it takes a peculiar type of person, and it is a peculiar type of person who feels safe to pull it inside the road. We had a camper van for 20 years. I've been to Scotland and the islands on a number of occasions, and I've never felt comfortable just wild camping. But there are people who relish in that because they don't like paying to park. And if we start having more organised CL type sites, it may be, as long as you can't see them in the landscape, it may not have a big impression on the AONB. But Chris, I've got to take task with you here. You cannot compare in any way the Gower AONB with part of Scotland. Gower AONB is just one little tiny microcosm of Scotland, and it's a huge country. And you know, you can drive up there and still not see loads of people. So if they've got a problem, it's God help Gower. That's all I can say.
Gordon, did you mean me?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
Right, no problem. I would simply add that Paul Thornton mentioned Scotland. The economic impact from North Coast 500 runs to tens of millions of pounds. The amount that Highland Council was planning to spend, even with their increased ranger service, ran to about 150,000 a year. So, you know, there's a very clear reason for them wanting to have that route marketed. It does bring a lot of business and a lot of money into an area which hadn't previously had vast amounts of investment. And I think, Gordon, you are probably right that, you know, Gower is a lot smaller, but, you know, you can see the same issues, the same pressures in Pembrokeshire, where they've had to step up their enforcement action quite drastically this year. It would be maybe useful. I mean, I'm aware of Kevin Bryn and one or two other sites that have had problems. But yeah, it is a widespread problem, and it's one of those issues where if you apply pressure in one point, it tends to go somewhere else rather than disappearing. And you are quite right, Gordon. There is a group within that market that are, should we say, reluctant to pay for overnight parking. It's almost an issue of the whole concept for them is that you don't pay for overnight parking. Linda, I was just going to ask, you'd mentioned this as an issue at Southgate. Did you want to update us on that?
No.
No.
Oh,
okay.
No, you winked it, Linda. It's no, is it? Shaking it. No. No. Okay. No.
It's not changed.
Yes.
There's still a couple there every night and more at weekends. The issue is the mess that they leave behind. They just leave bags of rubbish, and of course there's no toilet facilities, so it's within the grass around the car park.
Okay. All right, so I can't see any other hands up. But if people do have ideas, please bring them forward, and it may well mean the change of legislation or something to try to deal with these matters.
That's actually something I was going to mention and forgot about. The police crime sentencing and courts bill that is being proposed by the current UK government would potentially criminalise some of this behaviour. So a bit too early to say whether that's actually going to get passed as it stands, but certainly there are things around that that may well change.
Okay. Well, Chair, you got a hand up there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It depresses me, some of this. It's not the wild camping. I mean, I'll confess I have wild camped in the past with a tent that I've carried on my back, and I've come dark and fixed it up, and come dawn and I packed it up and moved on, and you wouldn't know I'd been there. At least I hope you wouldn't know I'd been there. Whereas some of this mobile home stuff or whatever, it's getting beyond. Or it's almost like mini raves taking place in places where people turn up and just decide, well, this is where we're having a party tonight, and leaving in the morning, leaving in a mess. And I don't know what we're going to do about it, because I have been in meetings, not in very recently, where people are complaining there are not enough police dealing with the drugs on our streets and the drug-related violence and all that sort of thing in other parts of Swansea. Saying that why are police down Gower when all the troubles here? Of course, people down Gower will say, why do we never see a policeman? There simply aren't enough. So whilst laws might change, the ability to enforce them is the key. And until we have a a police force which has the ability to even enforce the current ones, then I think we are going to struggle. And I don't blame the police for that. They have the money and the resources they've got, and they're stretched thin. But it's people who have no respect for the countryside that are just coming down. They think it looks pretty. They don't care what it, before they get there. They don't care what it looks like when they leave.
Right, you are. Okay, thanks everyone. It was a really good discussion there. And that's the last item on our agenda. But the next meeting is on your agenda there for today is the 4th of October, again at 2 o'clock. Excellent input. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers now.
Thank you all. Bye bye.